We're all, I think, right around the world, very interested in what might happen in the upcoming terms. We've watched the current team under Biden doing very badly in the polls, and the polls seem to be indicating that there was going to be a major red wave,
Yes.
and that the Republicans would take the House and the Senate again. Now, people are saying the polls are faltering. The Biden administration is recovering despite all of the challenges that seem to be in front of it. You've had Roe versus Wade. How might that impact at all? You've had the raid on Mar-a-Lago, on President Trump's home by the FBI. How are you reading all of this? Because it's so important for America and indeed the world.
Yeah, I think there's two issues, and one are the Republicans really stumbling? So, for example, today a poll came out, and Joe Biden has dropped in the Reuters, Ipsos poll, which is considered center-left poll. He's gone from 41 back down to 38. And so there's this kind of media, because of the passage of his so-called inflation fighting bill and the student debt, there's not been polling on those issues, but they feel that's momentum, so it's been ginned up in the media. But when you actually look at Biden's polls, they've gone down this week. And when you look at key races that they felt were indicators of Republican stupidity by nominating people who had no political experience, J.D. Vance in Ohio, he's up in some polls. Blake Masters in Arizona, he's within 1 or 2 points in some polls. Herschel Walker, that everybody thought was a disaster, he's actually ahead of Warnock. So I think it's not quite the landslide that they thought, but it's going to be a big win. The other issue is, what is the Democratic strategy that gives them this confidence? And if you look at the political landscape, no one is talking about an open border and 3 million people crossing. Joe Biden blew up immigration law. It doesn't exist in America on the southern border. Nobody's talking about gasoline prices, because in their way of thinking, if they've gone up $3 and they went down 50 cents, that's a cut, but they're still much higher, and people know that. Inflation went from 9.2 and now it's 8.5, but 8.5 is extraordinary. The Fed is going to tighten up. People are still, this is the anniversary week, last week was, of the Afghanistan debacle. So they don't want to talk about those issues, so what are they doing? So we had the January 6th commission, of which there was no Republican on the committee who did not vote to impeach Donald Trump or who had a political future. The two people on it have no political future, at least in the Congress, and they voted to impeach Trump. And that psychodrama then led into the raid on Mar-a-Lago. We've never had a president's home raided in the history of the country, and we've had a series of narratives. Each one has replaced the other one when it ran out of credulity. So what I'm getting at is, they don't want to run on the record. The problem is with the Republicans that they are reactive. And so if they were to follow the 1994 Newt Gingrich paradigm, in which Donald Trump or whoever is the nominative head of the party, they would say, this is what we're going to do in the first 100 days should we take the House and the Senate. This is what we're going to do on energy. Here's how we're going to fight inflation. Here's what we're going to restore a deterrent foreign policy. We're going to be very skeptical. We're going to let the states decide about abortion. It's not going to be a federal dictate. And if they would have the candidates then run on those national issues rather than, well, we're not insurrectionists. You're defaming us. We're not fascist. You shouldn't have raided. This is terrible. So they're reacting in a news cycle to these melodramas that are concocted. And it's taken a lot of momentum, at least, out of them. I don't think it'll change, but at some point, some adult in the Republican Party is going to have to say, do your worst, and we're going to do our best. We're going to have a national agenda, and it's going to be the antithesis of this disastrous 2 years, and we're all going to be on the same page, and this is what we're going to run on, and I think they'll be okay.
I would have thought politics 101 is to set out a vision. You've got to be able to say to people, we think X, Y, and Z are real problems, and here's how we're going to resolve them. Otherwise, you're defined by your political opponents.
I think at some point, maybe I'm being a little extraneous, there's a Waterloo moment with Donald Trump in the Republican Party. And that is, I think people who are running for office are going to tell him the 2020 election is history. And to the degree that there is a legitimate criticism about the outcome, it was probably lost in March and April when the voting laws were changed, and that was not addressed by the Republicans. And right now we need to look at the future. And each moment that you go back there, you play into the fake narrative of an insurrection and fascism, and that's what they want you to do. And so Donald Trump is going to have to decide which is more important to him, to be the leader of the Republican Party and to look ahead and not to do what he did in 2020 when he fixated on the election. He let the Georgia races, the 2 Senate races, sort of, he basically told his supporters the vote won't be valid. And then the independents, he seemed to be distracted, so they elected 2 neo-socialists in Georgia, of all places. And so that should have been a warning. And so he's going to have to get that message to barnstorm the country and help these candidates and not talk about what happened. And if he doesn't, unfortunately for him, there's an array of very talented people, unlike the Democratic Party. There's a successful governor, Ron DeSantis in Florida. There's Tom Cotton, a good senator. There's Mike Pompeo. There's Nikki Haley. There's Marco Rubio. There's all this talent, and they're waiting for an opening. And if he doesn't take the responsibility to run on the agenda and to make sure that other people other than himself win this time around, I think he's going to be in real trouble.